Hi again then guys, and welcome to another look back into the past, the very rich history, in fact, of the Gran Turismo franchise as far as car lineups go, to one of the best overall variants of race cars from the games, the hugely popular, very widely loved from those who have played the game, Mitsubishi FTO JGTC race car. Now as far as pronunciation goes, well, I'm not exactly sure how this one is pronounced. I'm sure there are people who do know. I tried to look up pronunciations, but seemed a bit vague. I couldn't find any really. But let's call it the Taeivon Trampio FTO. That's about as close as I'll probably get. So this car, as I said, is a fan favourite. It's one of the most commonly talked about cars from people who have played the second game, who want it brought back, or just in general have really fond memories of it. And that is an interesting thing, which is kind of an ongoing theme throughout the entire Gran Turismo franchise, that whenever we have Mitsubishi FTO race cars, people always love them. And the two main ones in particular are of course this car, which stopped at the second game, unfortunately, and then after that we had of course the also widely loved and much better known, because of how many people have played the later games, Super Touring Car, which of course is a fictional race car, whereas this one is real. Now, some of the interesting things which set this car apart from many of its JGTC equivalents in newer games are things such as its front-wheel drive. In fact, it's one of the only front-wheel drive JGTC cars in the franchise. We don't have any front-wheel drive JGTC cars in any of the newer games. So that in itself is pretty awesome. It immediately sets it apart from some of its kind of rivals. Obviously there are other Super GT cars to go up against on GT2, but even something like the Audi TT LM race car has similar numbers in some cases. The weight, for instance, the body style is fairly similar, but of course that one's fictional, whereas this is real. Now, it's very light, it weighs only 960 kilos, which means it's a whole lot lighter than most of the JGTC cars that we have on newer Gran Turismo games like GT5 or GT6, but it does also have quite a bit less power. You're looking at just under 380 horsepower and just over 250 pound-feet. It's from a 6-cylinder engine. The horsepower per tonne is very good, almost 400, which for a car with that kind of power is a really nice level to be working with, and even the price is actually very good. 500,000 credits severely undercuts a lot of its kind of rivals, like the aforementioned Audi. You could put it up against the Honda S2000 GT1 as well. That one has fairly similar numbers, similar kind of weight. More power, of course, both the Audi and the Honda have a lot more power, but that's the great thing about this car. And this is something which pretty much anyone who's driven it back then can attest to. It's so good. This car is a brilliant race car, a brilliant track car, and it's one of those vehicles which is the real epitome of going beyond its raw spec. That's something which I talk about quite a lot in these videos, but I don't talk about that much in the racing world. That tends to be something that applies more to road cars, especially stuff like hot hatches or sleepers, where their raw performance is significantly better than, for instance, their power figure might lead you to initially believe. And that's usually something which electric cars, rotary engine cars, gas turbine engine vehicles, they have a very good standard of that, where they'll have like 300 or 400 horsepower, but their performance will equal something with 500 or 600 or 700 horsepower. That's the great thing about those cars. In the case of this one, it's not so much about the engine, because the engine is fairly conventional compared to something like a rotary. It's more so about the complete package, because when a car is a really well-designed front-wheel drive chassis anyway, which the road car is, combined with ultra-low weight, far more downforce, and tons of grip from stuff like racing tyres, well, you don't need a massive amount of power. And this car is pretty much the epitome of that philosophy on Gran Turismo 2. There are of course other cars that can beat it, plenty of other cars, but there aren't many for the same power level which can. And of course power level is a lot more important on Gran Turismo 2 than it was on 3 through 6. Now on GT Sport it's very important again, because that's how the road cars are classified, whereas on all of the other games, well, 3 and 4 there were no classifications, and then later on we had of course the PP system. This car would have probably not been quite as good for a PP level as it was for a power level, because the PP would have been more accurate to how good it actually is, whereas the power level is deceptive. because you can get into races with this car that it will genuinely dominate, because you'll be going up against, in some cases, aftermarket tuner cars, sports cars, maybe even muscle cars under some circumstances. And where those races allow for a race car to be used, or in some cases for a front-engine, front-wheel drive car to be used, this car will pretty much dominate on those tracks, especially in front-wheel drive exclusive events. Now, I didn't use this car a huge amount in career mode myself. I can't recall what I did use for those events, but it wasn't this. But it does have a ton of potential for those who do want to. And actually, when I'm thinking about it, I think I might have used the Renault Laguna for those events instead. Similar kind of advantages, also front-wheel drive, and when you fully tune it, you can turn it into the BTCC style touring car. Very similar power output, similar kind of weight, and also superb handling, just like this one. But for those who do decide to go back and use this car, if you've never driven it before, you really are in for a treat. It's a brilliant race car. I personally like it a lot more than the Super Touring car because the livery is more interesting, it's a real car which is cool, and the fact that it's front-wheel drive just gives it such a unique advantage. And if this were brought back, this could be alongside the Nismo GTR LM car as being one of the best front-wheel drive cars in the franchise. So chances of it coming back are probably slim, to be fair, but if it did, a whole lot of people would be happy, and there are even liveries replicating this car on the community now for stuff like the Evo race car. So the love is still there, for sure. But that's it overall for this particular pick. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.